The Salem witch trials resulted in witchcraft accusations against more than 150 people and the executions of 20. So what went wrong? We explore this and other facets of the witch hunt in our new podcast, The Thing About Salem, premiering June 1st.
The Thing About Salem offers bite-sized episodes in both video and audio formats that you can enjoy in 15 minutes or less.
I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack. Our ancestors experienced the Salem witch trials.
And here's a little taste of what you can expect from The Thing About Salem. Possibly Dr. William Griggs decides that the girls, they're not sick in a natural way. They're under an evil hand. Just like that one, Sarah. So what does it mean that they're under an evil hand?
The devil has come to Salem.
The devil's in Salem.
Each week, The Thing About Salem brings you information on a thing from the witch trials.
Episodes will stream on YouTube and all podcast platforms. To get ready, find us at aboutsalem.com.
Be sure to join us for episode 1 on June 1st. Witch Hunt Podcast is raising money for the ultimate opportunity to expand our globally recognized documentation of witchcraft accusations. And we need your help to make it happen. Your gift of any size can be donated now at www.endwitchhunts.org/donate. Help us fund our travel expenses to York, England to attend the Witchcraft and Magic Conference at University of York so we can learn from and connect with top research experts in this field.
And do you want to learn even more about the Salem witch trials and have fun doing it? Check out our new podcast, The Thing About Salem, which premieres June 1st. Our website, aboutsalem.com, has more information on the show and on the witch trials. Want access to exclusive content right now? Please join our Patreon as we build our community. Go to patreon.com/aboutsalem to sign up today. Welcome to Witch Hunt Podcast. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah Jack. Today, we have a very special episode that's particularly meaningful to me. We're talking with Antonio Stuckey about his book, Sober and Civil, which tells the story of Sarah Cloyse, who happens to be my great aunt.
And my aunt, too. That's because Sarah Cloyse was the younger sister of Rebecca Nurse and Mary Esty, who were both executed in 1692. Unlike her sisters, Sarah survived the trials, but spent 9 months in jail.
Antonio really shows us not just the accused witch, but Sarah, the person. Through court records and careful research, Antonio reveals the woman who inspired the 1985 PBS miniseries, 3 Sovereigns for Sarah.
What's fascinating is how Antonio frames Sarah as an underdog, someone whose story has been overshadowed by her more famous sisters.
In this conversation, we'll explore Sarah's life before, during, and after the trials. We'll talk about her first husband, Edmund Bridges, who seemed to have a talent for getting into disputes, and her second husband, Peter Cloyse, who stood by her throughout her imprisonment.
The dramatic moment when she walked out of church, slamming the door behind her, leading to her accusation, features centrally in Sarah's story.
Welcome back. We are so excited to talk about the Salem witch trials with you today. Can you remind our listeners about yourself and tell us what we are going to talk about today?
I am Antonio Stuckey. I've been on the podcast before. I did the episode about being a tour guide in Salem, and today I'm here to talk about my book, Sober and Civil, which is about Sarah Cloyse.
Why did you write Sober and Civil?
The reason why I wrote Sober and Civil was because I felt that a pull to Sarah's story. I started working at the homestead a few months prior, and I just felt this really weird pull to her. And I decided, and I purchased a copy of the Day by Day Chronicle, and I was just moseying through, and I realized, I'm like, oh, everyone kind of talks about Rebecca or Mary. I'm like, there was a third sister. And I like writing about underdogs, I like research looking into them. And I just fell down the rabbit hole, and I was like, and she's the one, I hate to say it like this, but it's like, she's the one that survived. You know what I mean? And it's always those ones that we don't know a lot about because their stories didn't have that dramatic ending. I hate to say it like that. It's like Catherine Parr with Henry VIII. You all know about like Anne Boleyn, or because, I mean, graphic, but her head was cut off. You know what I mean? We know about Rebecca and Mary because they were unfairly executed. No one really knows about Sarah because they're like, oh, she survived. It doesn't matter. But it does matter because she was in jail from the beginning of the trials to the end of the trial. So she was there. She saw everything. Well, almost everything.
Yeah. And I want to remind our listeners that my ancestors are the Town family, and that Rebecca Nurse was my ninth great grandmother, and Mary Esty was my ninth great grandmother. And so Sarah was my aunt. And getting a look at your book told me more about that third sister, like you're talking about. There is one part of her ascendancy that I've been fascinated with, and it'll probably come out in our talk today, so I won't spoil that. But learning more about her and thinking about, as you said, she was there that whole time, that her view of what was happening. So awesome. What did you want to say through your book?
Something about Sarah and telling it through her perspective was what I felt needed to be told, because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions out there about the witch trials. And as I mentioned earlier, Sarah was there for the whole thing. So it's like, it makes sense. Like, oh, well, if I'm going to be talking about the whole scope of the witch trials, might as well be someone who's there for the whole thing. That way I can show what's going on and how this affected her. With the first accusations was Tituba and Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, and then Rebecca's accusation, and the first execution with Bridget Bishop, and then the final executions, and then the court of judicature, and eventually her being brought to a grand jury and then being released. And then there, from the very quick, like, after that point, there were trials, but no one else was being convicted or executed because the governor, I don't want to say begrudgingly stepped in, but people were noticing, like, hey, man, like, these people that are being released on the same basis of evidence that we are convicting people. And so he's like, it's not making sense. And the governor's like, oh, yeah, that's right. Like, maybe I should say something. Maybe I should do something. Then he did. And Chief Justice William Stoughton was not happy about that. But yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about Sarah's family, the Towns?
I just picture them to be a very delightful family. And that was a vibe, something I hope shone through. Something I found really fascinating was that the mother and all of her daughters were church members. I don't remember if I was able to find out about her sons, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were. It kind of shows the character of the family. Very respectful, very kind. They were not the wealthiest family, but they definitely were cared about one another. There was a point in my research, though, where I was like, oh, how were they because it brought up a lot of questions, because jumping ahead in the timeline a little bit, when Sarah's first husband passed away and she went back home, there was kind of like nobody took her in because she had nowhere to go. And then within a few weeks or about a month, she was asked to leave Topsfield because they couldn't support her. And I'm like, and it kind of made me go, I'm like, well, maybe they weren't as much caring much as I thought they were. But then I'm like, well, also, this is back when you had 8 children. Most families had 6 to 8 children, and having another 6 mouths to feed, it's not something you're able to do. So I'm like, okay, they definitely cared about each other. You know what I mean? Because I think there's a very unfair misconception that Puritans didn't love their children, didn't love their wives or husbands or relatives. But I think the Towns were a very close family. And it shows later on in when people are petitioning for people to be exonerated. So I'm not going to jump ahead because I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah.
So they were a really large family, the
Yes.
Towns.
Yes. I think I did the math. On average, each of the 6, I think it was 6 Town children, but Mary, Sarah, Rebecca, Joseph, John, Edmund, I think each of them had between 6 to 8 children. I think Edmund, though, had the most out of 9 or more, at least 9 that survived.
Wow.
Yeah, very. I couldn't imagine having to do Christmas gifts. No, Christmas band. So I guess, but nowadays I can imagine having to do Christmas for that.
Yeah. But you make some good points there. Your 9 children, you had to have a lot of children because a lot of them, unfortunately, didn't survive. But then the Puritan families did grieve their children.
Yes.
Obviously, you see some of that in the Salem witch trials testimony, where they're having dreams or visions of, murdered children coming to visit and that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Especially from Ann Putnam Sr. with, I think her the daughter that passed away. Her name was Sarah also. And it's interesting. Something I still think about though, I'm like, had this happened 40 years prior, Ann Putnam Sr. would have been accused of witchcraft because that's exactly what happened to Alice Lake.
Oh,
Uh,
right.
and so that's something I like off topic, but it's something that even if you look further back, you still see that grieving and everything. And Sarah even lost 2 children, I think. Granted, the one that she lost was about 22 years old, but then very quickly after, she lost another child not long after birth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we can see in colonial diaries as well, such Puritans as Cotton Mather and Samuel Sewall grieved every child that became ill, every child that passed, they mourned.
What should we know about Sarah's life prior to marriage?
She was the youngest. She was the baby of the family. And something that is really people like to theorize on is her relationship with her older siblings, specifically her sisters, obviously, because that's always kind of like what we focus on and what I focus on, obviously. But there was a 20-year age gap between her and Rebecca. There was a lot of debate as to when Sarah was born, but through some sleuthing and through a little bit of math, I was able to conclude that Sarah was born around 1641, 1642, give or take. And so she was about 21 years younger than Rebecca. And so I feel that while later in life they were close, I feel like the sister that she looked up to more was Mary, because Mary was only 7 years older than her. And so I think Mary played that role of like the older sister who's like, hey, this is what life is like. Like, I'm going to help you. I'm going to teach you. Maybe I'm sure they picked on each other a little bit. They got into their spats and their arguments. But obviously back then things were different. And so she grew up with all of her older siblings. She was one of the last ones to be married. She stayed with them. And then it's kind of just interesting just to kind of look at it and wonder about who maybe her favorite sibling was. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, we'll never get that answer unless somehow Sarah Cloyse appeared right next to me and answered that question. But it's just something that's nice to think about.
Thank you for that information about her early life. What should we know about Sarah's first husband?
Wow. He was a character. I'm not saying he was a troublemaker, but reading a lot of the stuff about him where he was kind of getting into disputes with the Goulds, or he was getting in disputes with the wealthy merchants in Salem town, being brought in and out of court for wearing back then they called it a periwig, but we would know it now as a wig. I feel like he was trying to make his life better. If that's the word if that's how I want to describe it. He was trying to like be like, oh, like I'm just as like worthy as everyone else. I can do this. Unfortunately, they didn't think that. So he was always getting in trouble. And so I couldn't only imagine how Sarah felt about this. For instance, like the first major issue was with John Gould, and they had to leave Topsfield because of it. If I was Sarah, I would have been so angry at my husband that he's making me pick up and leave my family and have to go to Salem town where I totally have to reorient my life, figure out a new way to make money because now I'm not growing crops. Now I'm living in town where I live on an acre instead of 8, 10, 20 acres of land, and a new way of surviving. I mean, he was her first husband. We don't have any letters or journal entries showing like what the relationship was like, but I'm sure it was one of at least mutual respect. And they had five or six children together. But he was a jack of all trades. Obviously, he was a farmer. He did work as an attorney. For Pete's sakes, he worked with Philip English. As soon as Philip English arrived to town, he started working with him, and other people were like, "Oh, you're working with him now." And then they sued him over it. Then they also said that he was saying these slanderous things, and he's like, "No, I'm not." It's just interesting though. Sarah really kept in the background for a lot of it. She didn't get involved, which really makes me wonder, had Edmund not died and they were still married by the time Sarah was accused, what he would have done for her. He definitely was not Peter Cloyse, but that's another question. I'm like, I wonder what he would have done for Sarah in her moment of need, because granted, she was a woman. So that was her place. She was to keep quiet, you know what I mean? But still.
But would have he been in jail with her?
Exactly, too. Given that, who he was, and I think he very easily would have found himself accused. He was not very well liked. He had a lot of issues. I shouldn't say, he was not well liked. He had issues with a lot of people who play very important roles in the witch trials. The minister, John Higginson, did not like him. And so it's a very interesting hypothesis, or something I would love to see in an alternate timeline. Not obviously visually. I'd like to see written down. Oh, this is what could happen.
Well, it sounds like it's time for you to put a fiction book together.
Oh, well,
Sarah.
I am working on one, just not about. It takes place during the witch trials, just not.
Yeah.
Not focusing on the Salem witch trials.
Mm. Yeah, the court transcripts that you shared, it really painted this evident conflict that was happening between the community members. And it's hard to see those earlier decades knowing what's coming up in 1692. You feel the dread. But it also it kind of reminded me of Hugh Parsons over in Springfield, who was convicted in Boston. He wasn't liked. I think we have probably more of his comments and more records of the way that he was offending people, less hearsay even, maybe. But it just really showed that there were these individuals in the communities that weren't just getting in line and being quiet. They were trained to be humans with personalities and desires and wanted to establish themselves the way they wanted to. And Edmund wanted to wear a wig.
Yeah. Heaven forbid he wants to wear a wig. And then even clearly people were so ruffled by it. I mean, Nicholas Noyes wrote an essay about it. Not Edmund specifically, but just the whole idea of it. I think he just wanted to do whatever. But I always very much imagine Sarah being a no-nonsense person. So I can only imagine the conversations they had home.
Yeah. So what was going on with the taverns? I saw a transcript or a letter or a report. What was it?
A letter,
complaint,
transcripts, and a few. Yeah. So I don't want to say everyone had a tavern back then, but you definitely knew there was Edward and Sarah Bishop. There was not Bridget Bishop. For anyone who still believes that, put loud and clear, Bridget never owned one. There was John Proctor, who owned one. It's just the usage of a tavern was a little bit different depending on where you were. So if you were John Proctor or Edward Bishop out in the village or Salem Farms, you really relied heavily on traffic. Whereas if you lived in the town, like Edmund and Sarah, you relied on it, yeah, but you were always going to get someone who was traveling through or wanted to stop by for a pint. But even then, if you had a tavern, you had to follow such strict guidelines. You can't serve alcohol past this time. You can only serve this much alcohol throughout the whole day. And then if you get caught selling it, not only will your patron be fined, but you yourself will be fined as well. You can't sell, obviously back then it was the 17th century, so you're going to see very racist kind of segregation. You can't sell cider or ale to indigenous people. And Sarah and Edmund got in trouble for that. Because they did. And even a few men clearly were drinking a little too much at the Bridges Tavern because they were fined for being drunk publicly. And they're like, oh, I just got it over at Edmund's Tavern. Luckily, Sarah was not the one who got in trouble for it. Edmund took the fall for it. But even their children were asked to testify in some of these cases, being like, "Oh yeah, I served this and this for him," or "No, I didn't." But it's just, if I lived back then, I would want to be a tavern keeper, because that is where you get to see the most stuff. Because even you see with Nathaniel Ingersoll, you get like a front row seat to all of this like drama. Your life's never dull if you're a tavern keeper. That's the conclusion I've come to.
And that's not because there was a bunch of fun happening in there, because that
Oh, yeah.
wasn't allowed.
Exactly. Like you could. I wouldn't be surprised if I read in those rules that's like you cannot breathe. Like you have to hold your breath and you have to do this and this. I would not be surprised, but it was still a very like rambunctious place.
Yeah, I know people got in trouble for having shuffleboard and games going on. Apparently, it wasn't cool to play games in a bar.
Yeah, clearly you just
You can't drink
went there for one
in
thing.
game. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But I thought one that was funny in your book, somebody was reported to have drank, or they consumed 3 quarts of cider in one
Yes.
sitting. And I'm like, that's 6 pints of cider. That's a pretty healthy amount of, it's more than a 6-pack of beer.
Yeah. Like I would love to know what they put in it.
Yeah. Yeah. How strong was it?
Yeah, I know they didn't really drink water as much as people think they did. There were different strengths of ales and ciders and stuff back then. But still, like, to have at least 3 or 4 people get in trouble for over drinking, I'm like, Sarah, what were you putting in this?
You're walking out all wobbly.
Yeah.
It makes me think of now I'm not with the Wassailers that were demanding the apples and
Oh,
cider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
In Salem Village, the guys demanding the cider that one year.
Yeah.
it was pretty
And then-
crazy.
They like stole a bunch of apples or threw
Yeah.
them, or it was like a whole thing with.
They tore down fences. They did everything to that poor guy who was the one guy in town that had apple cider at that moment, apparently.
Listen, people think these Puritans were just this uptight bunch when they really were not. Like, religiously, yes, but that was for 1 day a week. The rest of the week, they clearly were not these, like, uptight people. They had fun back then. Secretly. They definitely had fun.
They were just like us. I mean,
Exactly.
I think that's so important. And I think that's part of what you're doing in your book is showing Sarah Bridges Cloyse is a person like
Yes.
we are people.
You were able to touch on a lot of the accused. And when you're looking at the accusations and just what's being said, it's not making me think, oh, they're practicing witchcraft. It's just, oh, why are they choosing this person to attack in to say that they're being attacked with the chains and stuff. So yeah, it really portrays her as a human.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this whole time when writing it, I almost felt like she was like looking over my shoulder the whole time. Granted, because at least 3 or 4 of the chapters I was watching 3 Sovereigns for Sarah. So I had a very distinct image of Vanessa Redgrave in my mind. And I still fully picture Vanessa Redgrave as Sarah Cloyse. That's who she is Vanessa Redgrave. And she just is this, she's so fascinating. I just wish there was more out there about her. Just to show who she was, because she had such an interesting life, but had the witch trials never happened, we would never have known anything about her. The record would be there, but we wouldn't know a lot about her.
Very true.
Yeah, there's very few records for the women, and we don't have letters, diaries from a lot of the people, but especially from the women. We don't have their written words or even we just have what other people wrote about them.
Yep.
And that was not very much.
Exactly. And it's something I always remember is that history is written by the victors. And luckily, Sarah had a pretty not to say decent, she had a good reputation prior to the trials. So she's written very favorably, and it also helps that Rebecca and Mary are written about I shouldn't say very, they are always written very well about by people. But I like to classify my book about Sarah as her story. It's women's history, not about the men. Obviously, the men in her life played a very important role, but this is about her. This is about her sisters and how the situations that the men around her that got her into. And again, people are gonna be like, wow, he's so much hating on men. I'm like, I'm not. I'm being very upfront. It was a man's world back then. And her story is written by men. For Pete's sakes, I'm a man and I wrote her story. But I tried to go about it in a very unbiased way. And if there's like questions about being a woman, I would ask my mom or my grandmother, because I don't want to say like this and this and this. I want to be accurate.
It's so important to tell the women's stories because the men were in all the positions of power and authority, and they're the ones who made the history. At least, like you said, the victor gets to write the history, and they were the powerful ones. So that's the history that we got, was the men. So I really love any opportunity to get to see inside a woman's mind and in her life at that time.
Yes, I just think reading historically about women is so much more fascinating because they're either one of two things. They're either the demure woman who's very complicit, or they're, as some people like to say, like a she-wolf, like the complete opposite. They speak their mind, very loud and opinionated. Sarah Cloyse was very much in between. She's very much an in-between person. And I hope I conveyed that.
Sarah Good literally turned herself into a she-wolf.
Yeah, according to Elizabeth, she-wolf.
I was going to bring up Sarah Good because talking about Sarah Bridges, when she became a widow and she was warned out of town, she went and did something. She went and got married. But then there were some women, Sarah Good, I don't know what the status of her having been warned out. I know she wasn't a widow, but nobody wanted her coming. And when they fed Dorothy, they begrudged her. They begrudged Sarah Good. But clearly, Sarah Bridges stayed on the good side of people, even though she found herself in a quite helpless situation momentarily.
Yes. I think what also helped is there's no record of when Sarah married Peter Cloyse. However, if you do the math with the birth of their son, Ben, who was stillborn in September 1683, if you count back, it's at least January, by the time of January when they were married. And by early January, she's still known as Sarah Bridges because she signed her mother's will as Sarah. Well, this name Sarah Bridges was written and she marked it with an X because she might have not known how to write her name. And so at least by January 1683, she met Peter, she married him. It's just during those 3 months between September of 1682 and January 1683, what did she do? Where did she go? We don't really know. Maybe had Sarah Cloyse gone to trial and there were depositions people coming testify, we might have known. There might have been something that happened. But I think Peter knew of her situation and married her very quickly. They knew each other before they were married, and that's something I never knew. And it's something I found out after I had written the book, and I had already uploaded it to Ingram Spark, and I had about a month before it was going to be published. And so I found one little mention of Edmund Bridges and Peter Cloyse working together in the Salem town, and so I put that in. Just to clarify, like, they knew each other. He saved her. Peter saved her. He made very much her knight in shining armor. Had he not married her, God knows what would have happened. Maybe she would have married somebody else, but she got very lucky to marry in that amount of time. It also helped that Peter was decently wealthy. He was comfortable. And if you reflect that onto Sarah Good, I don't know the amount of time between her first husband's death and marrying William Good,
Yeah.
but it didn't help that William Good was not wealthy. And that's why it
Yeah.
just kind of kept her in the same class where Sarah was able to go up, a little bit and be comfortable and be able to be taken care of and have her other kids be taken care of.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. And it seems like Peter, he was really there for her during the witch trials and also after as well.
Yes. Samuel Parris, he was there so much that even Samuel Parris wrote it down in the journal. In August of 1692, it said, "Oh, Brother Cloyse has not been here for quite some time." And so he was there. He visited her. He made sure he was taken care of. Luckily, back then, visiting your relatives in jail was a lot easier than it is now. But he was always there. He made sure she was taken care of. And also, the town women were very lucky that they had husbands that took care of them. Isaac also made sure Mary was taken care of. Francis, I don't even need to say anything more. They loved their wives. And again, had Edmund Bridges been alive, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
Yeah.
Not to slander him, because I don't want any descendants to be mad at me, but it's just based off the records. What we have is, I have to be honest.
Yeah. And if he was trying to defend her in court, would that have carried as much weight as somebody like a Peter Cloyse, who has a clean reputation and is involved in the community in positive ways, interacting with other people at least?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, what should we know about the Salem witch trials to understand Sarah Cloyse's experience as an accused?
When people ask why someone's accused, it's usually a few different things. Oh, their reputation, association, they were just named by a confessor or someone who was accused they were just named. Sarah Cloyse, I firmly think that she was accused because of her association to Rebecca. We don't know why Rebecca was accused in the first place. There's a lot of different theories, and it had nothing to do with their mother being accused of witchcraft. I'm silencing that right now. There's only one mention of it, and even then, I don't even think that's the reason why. I think it's purely because Rebecca was accused. It also didn't help that on March 28th, 1692, when they're all sitting there for the Sunday services, Samuel Parris starts doing this sermon about Judas betraying Jesus and stuff like that. And everyone knows that Samuel Parris is talking about Rebecca and probably Martha Corey, because Martha Corey was also a church member. But Sarah took that personally, and she walked out. And she slammed the door behind her, allegedly. And then, according to Abigail Williams, knelt before a man in black and placed her hand on a book, according to Abigail Williams. And then, apparently 3 days later, Abigail Williams said that Sarah was a deacon in a great witches meeting, and she was serving blood and flesh to all of these other witches, 40 witches total. From March 31st to April 4th, so about 5 days, Sarah finds herself accused of witchcraft on April 4th, 1692. However, there is a delay between that complaint and the warrant being filed, because Hawthorne and Corwin, this is getting anticipated. And some things that people might not know is that Sarah Cloyse and Elizabeth Proctor were accused together. Their names are on the same arrest warrant. And after they go to the governor and they're like, "Hey, can you guys sit in on this examination? Because we think this is going to be huge." And they do, and they agree. And so they sign the warrant. And then within another 3 days, by April 11th, 1692, Sarah is arrested. And then she's brought to the Salem town meeting house with Elizabeth Proctor, and they're arrested. And according to Samuel Sewell, it was so packed in there. It must have been absolutely stunk with heat. So many people crammed into that space. There is not much. We know Sarah was questioned first. However, there is not a lot that she said. There's only 2 lines that were hers this whole examination. And mostly the information about her specter is coming from John Indian, Tituba's husband. I use the term husband loosely. I think more so of a common law husband. They were, as in, they're like, oh, they're both indigenous, so therefore they're husband and wife. But anyways, and so he's saying, oh, she bit me, she choked me, she pinched me, she bit me till the blood came. And Sarah's like, when did I do this? When did I do this? And he's like, oh, just this time, blah, blah, blah. And then she called him a liar right in front of everyone. And according to Upham, no matter how reliable or unreliable he may be, according to Upham, the accused were saying, oh, there's a yellow bird flying around her. The man in black is whispering things in her ear. However, that's not in the primary sources, so I don't know how true that is. And according to some sources, most of the afflicted were very calm during her examination. Like, they weren't like falling on the floor, thrashing around like Rebecca's. And according in some sources, Mary Walcott was knitting the whole time. But at some point, though, it was unclear, but I interpreted it as, and Marilyn also interpreted it as, Sarah Cloyse passed out. She asked for some water, and then she slumped in her seat, and that was the end of her examination. I think it was Abigail said that her spirit has gone to her sister nurse. And then Elizabeth is a question, and then John Proctor is arrested. And I never knew that. I thought John went home and he was arrested from his home. I didn't know that John was arrested from his wife's examination. I guess you could say that's one thing the Crucible kind of got right, because if you watch in the Crucible, he is arrested during a hearing. But again, I'm not saying the Crucible's entirely accurate. And then she's thrown in jail, and I couldn't imagine like Rebecca's reaction, like, why are you here? And I can only imagine like that, like them seeing each other for the first time in weeks. And then they get shipped off to the Boston jail, and they stay there for at least 4 more months, I think.
I was just going to say, can you tell us just a little bit? There were multiple jails holding the accused.
Really, it depended on where you lived and when you were, at least looking at 1692 trials as a whole, and when you were arrested. Before the Court of William Termine was set up, they expected the trials to be held in Boston. So those who were accused and expected to go to trial were sent to the Boston jail. So on April 12th, 1692, John Proctor, Elizabeth Proctor, Sarah Cloyse, Rebecca, Martha Corey, and Dorothy Good are shipped off to the Boston jail because they were expected to go to trial. However, interestingly, Mary Esty, when she's arrested, she is not shipped off to the Boston jail right away. I'll get into that a little bit later. But later on, though, you were more than likely going to be held in either Ipswich or the Salem jail. The Boston jail, once the trials got started, and by a certain point, those were the people who, at least I interpret it as, you're not going to be brought to trial anytime soon. I don't even think I think only really Dorothy Good remained in the Boston jail, and maybe a few others. And again, it really depended on where you were from. If you live closer to Ipswich, you were in Ipswich. Closer to Salem, you were in Salem. If you were from the Boston area, you went to Boston. For Cambridge, there's also the Cambridge jail. I forget about that jail, but the Cambridge jail too.
And you had an ancestor that was in one of these jails during the witch trials.
Yes. This is actually a perfect segue into Mary Esty. As I said, Mary Esty was arrested on April 21st, and she stayed in the Salem jail for that month. On May 12th, Giles Corey, Bridget Bishop, and a few others were ordered to go to the Boston jail, obviously pending their trial. However, Mary stayed behind. So it's very clear from the get-go, I think early on, people were like, oh, Mary Esty, like, no, like, it can't be. Which you would think also that would be the case for Rebecca or Sarah, but no. But because on May 18th, I don't know where, they never specify where, but Mary Esty is brought to the court. I don't know if it was at Salem Village or Salem Town, but they basically dismiss her. They're like, because the accusers were recanting their statements against her, except for Mercy Lewis. Mercy Lewis, then I think either that night or the following day, she basically is on the brink of death. She's claiming to be attacked by all these different specters, led by Mary Esty. They also named John Willard and a few other people. However, though, then John, I think it was John Putnam, goes to around basically to try to get Mary arrested, and then also more of the afflicted are coming to John Putnam's house where Mercy Lewis now was, basically on her deathbed. And this huge like scene kind of happens, and there's like, if you've ever been, for those of you who are listening, if you've ever been to the Rebecca Nurse homestead or a 17th century house at all, they're very small. So how I would picture it is Mercy's being kept on the first floor in the bed, obviously, as I keep saying, on the brink of death, air quotes around that. And you have Elizabeth Hubbard show up, Mary Walcott, Ann Putnam Jr., Abigail Williams, they all show up. And then they all also start to fall into afflictions. They're like, yes, Mary Esty is there and she's attacking her. She's strangling her with chains or whatever. And they name 3 more women alongside Mary Esty, John Willard, and I just remembered Mary DeRich, who was Elizabeth Proctor's sister. They name Sarah Bassett, who is the sister-in-law of Elizabeth Proctor, Sarah Proctor, who is the daughter of Elizabeth and John Proctor, and Susanna Root, who is my ancestor. Within a few hours, Mary Esty is arrested again from her son's home. I couldn't imagine, like, somehow they knew they were coming. I'm sure they probably expected them to come and arrest her again. But because she was so weak from being in jail, she was still at her son's house recuperating. And thank you, by the way, to Mary, who gave me most of this information. But they, according to the sources and historical legend, they put Mary in the root cellar in the house, and that's where she hid. And then they basically dragged her out of it and they arrested her. Josh and Sarah, I know you've both been there. You visited. It's common search, but I don't want people going up to the property because it is technically private. But you've been there, and so I couldn't imagine though, hearing that, like they coming closer and then pulling you out, and then you're off in jail. And Mary Esty was questioned again, and we don't have surviving records of that. But on May 23rd, Mary Esty, Susanna Roots, and at least 6 or 7 other people, they're at the Salem Village Meeting House, and they're made to perform a touch test. And basically where the afflicted are being brought to them, and if the accused are they're blindfolded and their hands put on the afflicted and their affliction stop, is basically a sign that they are the witch tormenting them. And so Mary and my aunt Susanna and all those other people, they're like, yep, there's enough evidence for a formal trial, and they're all shipped off to Boston. And that's where Mary finally meets up with her sisters. And I'm sure maybe by that point, Sarah and Rebecca might have known that Mary was released, but we're not sure. Or Mary told them, and she's like, I was released, but clearly, like, I'm back here. But now, obviously, with the whole thing with Mercy Lewis and almost killing Mercy Lewis, air quotes around that again, they found there's enough evidence to hold Mary for trial. And for about a month, the sisters are together till June 1st, I think, when Rebecca is shipped to Salem for her trial. Her case was selected to be heard first. However, according to Thomas Newton, once they saw all the people whose cases they wanted to try, it was Tituba, Sarah Good, Bridget, Rebecca, John Willard, Alice Parker, and a few others. They're like, this is too many cases. And so they ended up selecting Bridget's case to be held first, but Rebecca's was the next case a few weeks later. And obviously, as we all know, she was tried, found not guilty, and then they brought her back, changed the verdict, convicted, sentenced to hang. Meanwhile, Mary and Sarah were sent back to Salem on June 18th. And they were there. I'm sure they got that account, though, from Rebecca when they got back. And they're just like, what the heck? Like, first Mary's released and then rearrested. Rebecca's found but not guilty, then convicted. Her verdict's changed. And I'm sure Sarah's like, well, great. There's nothing that can be done for me. And then obviously they're there when Rebecca is executed. That was the hardest part to write in my book, actually.
Those twists like that where Mary's arrested, released, arrested again. Rebecca's not guilty, then she's guilty. And Rebecca also gets reprieved, and then the reprieve gets revoked.
Yep.
So it must have been such a tumultuous roller coaster for the town family and the sisters, especially in jail, watching each other go through these things and not knowing what's going to happen to me now. Yeah.
It's just like, but then though, after Rebecca's trial, like, I'm sure they fully expected to be up next, like for the next cases. Mary was brought to her grand jury in August alongside Martha Corey, but nothing is done. They're shipped off to Ipswich jail where they wait until September. And by that point, 5 more people had already been hanged, including George Burroughs, Martha Carrier, and John Willard. And John Proctor and George Jacobs. And finally they're like, okay, like this is it. Like they're gonna be put on trial. And then this is like the real like meat and potatoes of Sarah Cloyse's story, because and I'm sure like because this is like the big question as to why Sarah was never brought to trial. On September 9th, 1692, Mary Esty is brought to her grand jury and her trial, and she's tried and convicted and sentenced to hang, obviously. And then at the same time, apparently, Sarah's also brought to her grand jury. And they send out the witnesses, and by that point, the witnesses have already been summoned. And meanwhile, Sarah Cloyse and Mary Esty are being physically examined and all that stuff. The witnesses are coming. However, some witnesses don't show up. The witnesses that don't show up are Mary Town, Sarah's sister-in-law, and Rebecca Town, her niece. Mary Town says that her family's not well, and Rebecca is falling into some sort of afflictions. And then the court is like, no, you have to come. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, you have to come. And according to Marilyn Roach and a few other sources, they do show up. And in the records of the Salem witch hunt, it's right there, as clear as day, indictment of Sarah Cloyse for afflicting Rebecca Town. And most people go, wow, so her own niece accused her? My take on it is no. I think when she was there, she very clearly was not well. The afflicted would have been there, most definitely. And I think they would have probably said something along the lines of, oh, Goody Cloyse's specter is attacking her niece. Look at all this stuff. He's tormenting her, blah, 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 blah. And so they indict her for it. She's not only indicted for that, she's indicted for tormenting Mary Walcott and Abigail Williams. So she's charged on 3 counts. However, because of that delay of Mary and Rebecca coming, they have to postpone her trial. And so she's made to wait. And at least 6 or 7 more other people are tried, and they're all convicted. And by the end of this sitting of the court on September 17th, 15 people were tried and convicted. Giles Corey was already pressed to death, and had Sarah been tried, she would probably have been the 16th. However, the court realized there was no room for 15 people to be hanged at once. And so they choose 8 people. And out of those 8 people included Mary Esty. And Mary was one of the last people hanged on September 22nd, 1692. And then Sarah is made to wait. It's after that the court is like, oh, we're going to wait until November, which is completely different from what they've already done. They've done monthly court settings, and now they're like, oh, we're going to wait till November. And so I'm sure Sarah's like, okay, November is when it's done, but nothing happens.
And she's been in prison this whole time.
She's been in prison this whole time. November 1st comes and goes, and she's still there. She's in the Ipswich jail because the Court of Oye and Termine was disbanded. Not because the governor's wife was accused, but because the governor was like, we need to go back and we need to look at this again. And so the court was disbanded, and then they set up the new court of judicature. And that's when they're finally able to bring Sarah to her grand jury. Actually, they redid her grand jury, and they never found enough evidence from the indictments. They were all returned ignoramus. And I'm very sure that her jail feeds were up to date, and she was released.
After all those months and months from April 11th until the following year, through all the seasons and everything.
9 months.
9 months in jail. Yeah, that's awful.
So her jail fees must have been paid because she was released.
Mhm.
What was it like for her around her community after?
I couldn't imagine that. I'm sure farms were left in disarray because everyone's going to court to watch these show trials, which is basically what they were. However, Peter Cloyse is like, we're not staying here very long. He does play a very early role in getting Samuel Parris kicked out of Salem Village. However, by, I think, April 1693, which is a few months after Sarah was released, they are living in Boston. And then very quickly they move to Sudbury, which is out near Marlborough, which is about an hour away nowadays by car. And back then it was like a day's journey or whatever. and they lived there. We know this at least by 1695 because Peter requested their church membership be transferred to the church in Marlborough. And that's where they stay. Peter does become one of the founding members of Framingham. It is, I think, known as Danforth Farms. There is legend that Thomas Danforth gave them land because he felt so bad. However, Thomas Danforth did not really play a role in the trials until the very end. I think by that point, Sarah was already released. He was there during her examination, so he would have recognized her. However, I don't think he gave them this land. If I'm being fully transparent, people can debate me as much as they wish, but I don't think that's true. But they were in Sudbury, and then eventually where they lived in Sudbury became Framingham in 1700. Peter was one of the town leaders, basically. So Sarah spent the last few years of her life very comfortable. And they built a house in Framingham, which was said to have existed until modern day, when we learned very quickly, once the house was restored, the Cloyse house was not the house built by Peter. It's on the foundation. And that's where they lived until Sarah passed away in 1703. I think writing that, and then also the part where Rebecca went to her execution, that was like the saddest part to write, because I'm like, oh, the story is done. But I like to hope that the last few years for her were comfortable and she was able to like relax and breathe. I can imagine her state she would have been in, the trauma that she went through. There's some legend that I guess she never left her house after. Very rarely would she leave. I don't blame her at all. Yeah.
But she was surrounded by a lot of family that moved down there as well, wasn't she?
Not only from like her stepchildren, her children, and some of her nieces, some of her nephews, they all moved out there as well. Even from not just her sisters, but her brothers also, they moved out there. And I think her son Caleb's house is still standing. It's more of like a business office space now from what I've seen, but it's still standing, as is her nephew's Benjamin's house. Benjamin Nurse's house is still standing as well.
She has a descendant that people are very familiar with. Her name?
Yes. Her name is Clara Barton. She is a descendant of her daughter, Hannah. And I never knew that. And when I found that out, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, everyone knows who Clara Barton is. She's like one of the most famous nurses from history. And I think had Sarah lived an extra 150 years, I think she'd been very proud of who her granddaughter was.
Oh, yeah.
Clara was a very important person in history. And I think she definitely got that from her motivation to do what she did from Sarah. Maybe I'm biased, but I think she definitely got it from her.
Yeah. The tenacity that's in the DNA.
Yes, the town tenacity.
Yeah, so we can thank Clara Barton for founding the American Red Cross. She was so important, such a valuable organization, the things that they do, all kinds of emergency services. It's amazing.
Yep. And luckily, by that point, her daughter Hannah, was already married. So it's like if Sarah was executed, it never would have happened. But if Sarah was never born, we might not ever have the Red Cross.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
important.
She was so important, and she was the baby of the towns, and she was the sister that was spared.
Mm-hmm. But I just want to say before we go, I like in your book, you compared her to Sarah, the biblical Sarah, and talked about how she's like the mother of nations because she was one of the founders with her husband of Framingham and Salem's End community, all the diaspora from Salem and all the children and stepchildren that she parented over the years.
And she's just so overlooked, except for minus 3 sovereigns. We're very, very grateful to have 3 sovereigns for Sarah. But again, it's so like old. Like, I hate saying the 80s is old because but I mean, like, no one really knows it because it was aired on PBS, and who watches PBS anymore? Come on. But I would love for it to be remade. I think now, given with everything going on in our world, I think now will be a perfect time for it. I already have it fan casted. And if anyone is wondering who I want to play Sarah Cloyse, and if she ever hears this, Eve Best, who played Rhaenys Targaryen in House of the Dragon, please consider this. I have no money to offer you, but I want you to play Sarah, and Emma Thompson to play Mary Esty.
Oh, that would be excellent.
I haven't decided on Rebecca yet, though. Maybe Meryl Streep, but I really need a budget for that, and I don't think I'd ever have that budget. But if they want to do it for free, you're more than welcome to. I'd gladly write the script.
Little pro bono acting.
Yeah, why not?
It's a thing, right? All right. Thank you ever so much. This has been delightful. It's such an important story to get told, and I really thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing this episode of Witch Hunt with us.
Help us spread the word and grow our community. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels and share this episode or some clips to your social media.
Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow. The Salem witch trials resulted in witchcraft accusations against more than 150 people and the executions of 20. So what went wrong? We explore this and other facets of the witch hunt in our new podcast, The Thing About Salem, premiering June 1st.
The Thing About Salem offers bite-sized episodes in both video and audio formats that you can enjoy in 15 minutes or less.
I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack. Our ancestors experienced the Salem witch trials.
And here's a little taste of what you can expect from The Thing About Salem. Possibly Dr. William Griggs decides that the girls, they're not sick in a natural way. They're under an evil hand. Just like that one, Sarah. So what does it mean that they're under an evil hand?
The devil has come to Salem.
The devil's in Salem.
Each week, The Thing About Salem brings you information on a thing from the witch trials.
Episodes will stream on YouTube and all podcast platforms. To get ready, find us at aboutsalem.com.
Be sure to join us for episode 1 on June 1st. Witch Hunt Podcast is raising money for the ultimate opportunity to expand our globally recognized documentation of witchcraft accusations. And we need your help to make it happen. Your gift of any size can be donated now at www.endwitchhunts.org/donate. Help us fund our travel expenses to York, England to attend the Witchcraft and Magic Conference at University of York so we can learn from and connect with top research experts in this field.
And do you want to learn even more about the Salem witch trials and have fun doing it? Check out our new podcast, The Thing About Salem, which premieres June 1st. Our website, aboutsalem.com, has more information on the show and on the witch trials. Want access to exclusive content right now? Please join our Patreon as we build our community. Go to patreon.com/aboutsalem to sign up today.